Welcome back to Next Gen Console Watch, our show following everything happening with the latest gaming hardware. I'm Daemon Hatfield, and I'm joined by Max Scoville, host of IGN's PlayStation podcast, Podcast Beyond.
Hey.
And Ryan McCaffrey, host of IGN's Xbox podcast, Podcast Unlocked.
Greetings, Daemon.
Hello there. And this week we're talking about the professional PlayStation 5. PS5 Pro, not officially announced by Sony yet, however, believed by industry analysts to be coming later this year. So this would be a souped-up refresh designed to boost interest in PS5 after Sony had admitted it expects sales of the console to start falling over the next year. And if it came out this year, that would also put it ahead of the release of Grand Theft Auto 6 in 2025, which is probably going to be the biggest thing ever to happen to games. So, the main analyst here, the Dr. Serkan Toto, Tokyo-based games consultancy and content games, very reliable industry analyst, he says, quote, "There seems to be a broad consensus in the game industry that Sony is indeed preparing a launch of a PS5 Pro in the second half of 2024, and Sony will want to make sure to have a great piece of hardware ready when GTA 6 hits in 2025, a launch that will be a shot in the arm for the entire gaming industry." So, for a little bit of context, PS4 was released in 2013, PS4 Pro was released in 2016. PS5 Pro comes out in 2024. That'll be 4 years after the launch of the regular PS5. However, things are a little bit different this generation, as Sony and other publishers have been reluctant to let go of the PS4. Some of the biggest PS5 exclusives like God of War Ragnarok, Horizon Forbidden West can be played on PS4. Big recent games like Like a Dragon Infinite Wealth, playable on PS4. Last year's big games, Street Fighter 6, Diablo 4, Resident Evil 4 Remake, you can play them all on your PS4. Even something like Star Wars Jedi Survivor, previously a current gen only game, is being ported to PS4 and Xbox One. Also, the PS5 launched at the height of the pandemic and the worldwide chip shortage, and a lot of people were only able to finally find a PS5 a year or two ago, and I don't think those people are going to be super eager to already shell out for a new console. So it begs the question, what, is it too soon? Or there isn't a big library of games that seem to really take full advantage of the PS5 yet. Max, what do you think?
Yeah, I think it's definitely different this time around. The PS4 Pro, obviously the big thing it added was 4K support, which the base PS4 didn't have. It had a bigger hard drive. It had HDR support. All of these were I feel like, substantial bells and whistles. It was like something to actually consider buying an upgrade for. This time around, I'm not even sure exactly what it would bring to the table. I mean, aside from everything you said about sort of the slower adoption rate, and there's also the fact that, yeah, I mean, we're still getting a lot of PS4 games, and then this generation definitely had sort of a feeling of being a little bit iterative more than usual. As for Sony wheeling this one out, the other big thing is that usually this time in the generation, PlayStation consoles get a price cut. When the PS4 Pro dropped, the base PS4 model, we got the little slim version, that went down $100, which is pretty par for the course with basically every PlayStation generation up until this one. This time around, the PlayStation's actually getting more expensive in some parts of the world, and yeah, I don't know. If they plan on keeping the base the base PS5 model at the same price, I don't particularly know who this is for, aside from people who just really like having shiny new stuff.
Ryan, we're also, well, at least one time we know that Microsoft was planning to have a mid-gen refresh of the Xbox Series, codenamed Brooklyn, which was going to be out in this fall. But I think that the Xbox is kind of in a similar place where there just isn't a big stack of games that that seem to only be playable on Xbox Series X. So what's your sort of take on all this?
Yeah, you're absolutely right. The Brooklyn, if that is indeed real, if that's there's every reason to believe it is based on the fact that it was Microsoft's own internal documents. I know they were older, but this is it's not a horsepower bump. It is just a cost reduction for them, which we talked about on this podcast before. It'll be an all digital machine if that holds true. So yeah, it's just, when you factor in the price, as Max was mentioning, there's no indication that either of these consoles is going to get a formal price cut. The Series S has been on sale recently. The Series X had a few deals on it over the holidays, but there's just no reason to believe that a formal official price cut is coming. And so if a PS5 Pro is real, it's going to be at least $600. I'd be willing to bet an In-N-Out Burger lunch on that. That's the price point we're looking at, maybe even $650. And what percentage of the very healthy PS5 installed base is going to be willing to pay that when, as you guys both laid out, there just hasn't really been anything or there hasn't been much that's really fully leveraged the PS5 and made you think, wow, I'm so glad I upgraded to this. Not that there haven't been great games, but to me, I've said it on this show, I think probably 100 times. I'm going to make it 101 here. I still think Ratchet and Clank is the best looking next gen game, and that was an early game from Sony and from Insomniac, and I just don't think we've topped that. Which yet it will happen, but yeah, I mean, that said, you mentioned GTA 6, Daemon. We know that there's no PC version of GTA 6 at launch, and so I am such a fan of GTA. I hold the entire series in such high regard. I think GTA 5 is one of the 10 best video games ever made, period. And GTA 6 is going to be, by a number of different measurements, the biggest game of the decade. Whether it turns out to be as good as GTA 5 or, dare I say, better, remains to be seen, but it's certainly going to be the most anticipated, probably the biggest selling game. And based on Rockstar's track record with GTA, I am fully willing and ready to buy a PlayStation 5 Pro just for Grand Theft Auto 6, because it will be the best way to play that game. It'll be the best looking, best performing way without a PC version in there. And so that, from the Xbox side of things, makes you got to wonder, well, GTA is powerful. We know that. It's not just me. And so if Microsoft doesn't do a horsepower bump in the middle of the generation, is that like going to be a serious sort of black mark on their ledger here? If hardcore people like me are willing to go out and get a PS5 Pro just for the biggest game of the entire generation, I don't know, but it's some interesting food for thought.
Max, what do you think? Is there anything to that? Can Sony sort of align themselves as like the best place to play GTA 6 is on your PS5 Pro?
I could definitely see that being a strong argument. Ryan, to your point, I think it's a very conservative estimate to say that this is going to be the biggest game of the decade. I think it's going to be one of the biggest games ever, period. Like GTA 5 was the first entertainment product to break $1 billion in a week or something like that.
In a day, I think it was.
It was like 3 days. It was, yeah, whatever it was. It shattered records. It was, and that was a different time in terms of, how people play games. The hype for this game is just unprecedented. Like, it is so completely over the top. There are plenty of people who would, without hesitating for a heartbeat, shell out for a special edition PS5 Pro that has a GTA 6 on the box or whatever. Like, no questions asked. That absolutely could see that being a thing. I could also see Microsoft following suit and having a similar option on the table. I imagine that Rockstar is probably teaming up with one console manufacturer. We in the same way that we saw, Cyberpunk 2077. What am I saying? Back in 2020, there was the Xbox One X edition. There was like a special edition for that came around at the same time as launch. People they like to sell special editions around that. We don't usually see dedicated like actual hardware bumps alongside that. Usually special editions are kind of like hardware that's been out there for a minute. If any game can justify teaming up with new hardware, like GTA 6 is it for sure.
Well, it'll be interesting to see. Again, the PS5 Pro has not been officially announced by Sony, although analysts do believe it's likely to be coming this year. We'll definitely continue. This will be one of the major stories to continue following as we move deeper into 2024. Last week, we were talking about these 4 games that were coming from Xbox to other platforms, and in their sort of the podcast where they shared their plan. Phil wasn't ready to reveal the 4 games quite yet, but now, of course, we know what they all are. It's official. It's Pentiment, Grounded, Sea of Thieves, and Hi-Fi Rush. And after we actually know when they're all coming and to what platforms and when. So that's all out there. We have the results of last week's poll. We wanted to know, Switch and PS5 owners, would you buy some combination of Hi-Fi Rush, Pentiment, Grounded, or Sea of Thieves? A little over 55% of respondents said no, Xbox can keep them, but we'll see how that changes now that we know that they're all coming, and they're all coming very soon. 36% said you're interested in a couple of them, and 8% said they're going to get all of these, all 4 of them. Ryan, now that we know official, any sort of like follow-up thoughts on last week? These are sort of like, they're not Starfield or Indiana Jones level. They're a little bit smaller games. That's not a comment on their quality, but it's just, these are the games that Xbox feels isn't going to damage their, the Xbox, the idea of the Xbox brand by sharing them with other consoles, right?
Yeah, I mean, hell didn't freeze over.
Right.
We're here. We're doing the show. And I think that the big question that we're going to talk about on Podcast Unlocked this week, that'll be up by now as this episode airs, is what's next? Because Microsoft certainly, these are not going to be the only 4 games they ever do this with. So it's great that they're all 4. They're really good games, all 4 of them.
Yeah.
There's not a mediocre game amongst them. These are all excellent games. So it's great to see that Switch and PS5 owners will have access to one or more of these. And yeah, we're going to talk on Unlock this week about what could be next.
Max, any impression of whether or not some of these games will be embraced by the PlayStation community?
Don't sleep on Pentiment. Pentiment's great. Pentiment on Switch is a wonderful thing. Everyone should, take that game on the go. Good beach reading in February.
A lot of reading in that game. New poll for you to vote on for next week. Would you buy a PlayStation 5 Pro just for Grand Theft Auto 6? This is an easy yes or no, and make sure you vote at IGN.com the day this episode goes live, and we'll share the results with you next episode. And that's going to do it for this edition of Next Gen Console Watch. Thank you to both Ryan and Max. Thank you to Joba and Mariah and everyone working behind the scenes to make this episode possible. Sometimes it's tricky to pull off. My name is Daemon. We'll be back next week with more of the latest on the all gaming hardware. We'll see you then.